You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Hello, how are you guys? So we're going to get right into it this week because I mentioned a while ago that I was going to do a podcast about letting go. And letting go, for those of you that are new to the world of addiction and loving someone that struggles with addiction, is a really popular phrase in the addiction world. The whole phrase is let go, let God. And I used to lead small groups in this world for many years. And it always frustrated me when I heard that phrase, because I would say, okay, that's beautiful, right? That's a great goal to have. But how do you actually apply that to your life? I was looking for practical steps, a how-to of letting go, especially since struggling with control when you love someone struggling with addiction is a huge deal. It's super common because things feel so out of control. When you love someone that drinks too much or uses drugs or gambles or is addicted to pornography or whatever, your life just feels out of control. Nothing is predictable. You don't know if they're lying or telling the truth. You don't know what tomorrow is going to be, if they're going to break all their promises and go back to drinking or using drugs. You're walking on eggshells, waiting for the next catastrophe to happen. And so it's a heightened sense of anxiety that you struggle with on a daily basis. And it feels like the moment you let your guard down, the moment that you actually start to have a mini sense of hope that things might get better, is when it feels like the world comes crashing down again in a major way. And so you and I, we seek control because control feels safe. Control feels predictable. Control feels like the antithesis of addiction. And unfortunately, though, because I'm here to tell you loving truths, control is an illusion, right? In most cases. And so today we're going to take real life examples of the women who are in our secret Facebook group who have joined the programs that we offered. And in this secret Facebook group, you can ask any question you want. And the women in this group are legit amazing. They're from all over the world. And I guarantee you there's not one of them, or if you went in there and read the comments, you would see yourself in those comments. And what I love the most about this group is that they offer support and advice. So I've taken some of their, we asked them, okay, what's something you're having a hard time letting go of? And they honestly answered, because it's a safe place for people to be real and let their guards down. And I'm going to go through some of the examples they've provided. Sorry for my dog in the background. The mailman just showed up at the door. And we are going to talk about how to let go. And actually, in some of these situations, my advice is going to be for you not to let go. Some of these situations, I'm going to say, you need to get control of that situation. Letting go is not applicable in every situation, because if you let go in certain scenarios, your safety is compromised or your children's safety is compromised. So let's get real practical here and break this down for you guys, okay? So our first example is from a wonderful woman. And she says, I'm not going to say names because, again, I want to preserve anonymity and safety. So here we go. She says, I'm having a hard time letting go of what could have been. I know our relationship is over, but sometimes I'm still struggling with losing the life that I longed for. Healing is happening, but it's a slow process. Okay, first of all, amen. Healing is never accelerated. True healing isn't. So if you are thinking that for the easy answer that is going to magically change your life tomorrow and everything will be glorious and wonderful, I'm so sorry to tell you that's not going to happen. Your healing is a process. It took you a long, long time to get to this broken part of your life. There was a lot of little traumatic instances that happened over a long period of time. It takes a long period of time to heal that trauma, right? It takes commitment. It takes work. It takes making the daily choice to choose your future in order to make change, right? Which is why a lot of us avoid making change, because we don't want to do the work. Sometimes it's just easier to say, this sucks, and and complain about it. So I understand and I validate that healing is a process. Now, I also hear you saying that you're mourning what could have been. That is absolutely a step in your healing. It's truly part of the healing process, is to sit there and mourn the death of what could have been, of the dream, the death of the dream that your loved one would get sober and choose you and choose your future and your family and get sober for good, and everything that was meant to happen, everything you thought would happen. Like, you have a dream. When you agreed to get into a relationship with this person, you saw their potential. You saw what could have been. And you've been holding on to that fantasy and that image for so long. And when you leave, it's finally letting go of that fantasy and saying, you know what? This is my reality. This is, it's never going to happen, that fantasy. Or I'm going to choose me and my future, and I'm not going to wait anymore for that fantasy to happen or arise. So, what do? How do you let go of this fantasy to feel a sense of peace and excitement about your future? You fantasize and visualize a new future that gets you incredibly excited. You start replacing the old fantasy for a new fantasy. You dare to dream. Now, I used to do this every morning when my kids were sleeping. Before they woke up, I would get up in my jammies, I'd make a nice cup of coffee, and I would sit at my kitchen table and I would pull out a notebook and pen and start dreaming about what did I want. Dreaming about my future. I started creating and crafting a new fantasy, and I went into as much detail as possible. This is where I wanted to live. This is what I wanted my family to look like. I even went into detail about my dream man. And guess what? My dream guy didn't look too much like the guy I was married to. I wanted someone who was honest and told the truth no matter what. I wanted someone who was reliable and would come home when they said they would come home. And if they were running late, they would call and say, hey, I'm sitting in traffic. And I would hear the traffic in the background so that I could see that actually was the truth, right? That he wasn't sitting at a bar. I really fantasized about a dad to toss a football around with my kids and to show up at games sober and to tuck them in at night and to help. I fantasized about a partner that would help around the house. I fantasized about where I wanted to live. what my relationships with my family. And you guys, when I left my ex-husband, I had no friends. I was very lonely because I had been completely consumed by addiction. And so I fantasized about having girlfriends again and getting back to the joyful, happy person that I once was. And so can you. I want you to sit back and get silent and still and dare to dream about the future that you possibly could have. And it might be very different from the reality that you have. But the way to let go of the past is to get excited about the future. And I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about way in the future. You have to create a new fantasy, a new vision for your life that doesn't involve the one that you love right now, that doesn't involve your ex, because you've made a choice to move on. And I am so proud of you for doing that. And part of moving on, a very important step, is accepting yourself and your past for what it is, being grateful for the opportunity of loving someone with addiction. And yes, I just said grateful, because it is going to serve you so well in your future. You are going to look back at this moment in your life eventually, maybe not right now, but eventually, and say, I wouldn't take it back for anything. I learned so much. I actually grew into the person that I was meant to be, and addiction helped push me in that direction. You will, if you do not feel like that today, you will feel like that eventually. I promise that addiction is a gift, and you should not judge yourself for getting involved in this relationship. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later because somebody else mentions that. So let's go on to the next comment about letting go. Another woman in our Facebook group says, I'm having a hard time with the emotions and anger that come up after the divorce that I didn't think would come up. My ex-alcoholic husband did make it difficult at the end, so that did bring up more anger. But this last podcast about anger did help. I did a podcast, you guys, a couple weeks ago about anger. I know what I did was right for me, and I was happy once I left, but it doesn't make the divorce easier. I thought all my emotions would disappear as well. Okay, so I think what she's trying to say is this. She left. She did the right thing for her, right? She had the courage to follow through with leaving, and she committed and did it. But she's still feeling little morsels or little spurts of anger. And this is super important. I'm so glad she talked about this, because essentially what she's asking is, how do I let go of my anger? I thought if I left, everything would be okay. I love this. I love this. And I am going to do a podcast about what to do after you've left, because I know a lot of you have left. Here's the deal. When you leave your ex-husband or partner, you do have the illusion that all the hard work is done and over with and life goes on. And unfortunately and fortunately, there's still a little bit more work left to do. You are going to feel at very random times, moments of unresolved anger. So like weird memories will pop into your head when you're folding the laundry or you're driving down the highway. And they'll start to come up within you, and you'll feel all the feelings that you felt in that moment in the memory. Those are unresolved issues. They're unresolved residual trauma that is coming up that needs your attention. You still have scars from this relationship and that need your attention and love and thoughtfulness. That, again, is also part of the healing process. And instead of judging yourself for feeling angry, you need to love yourself and sit there and go, acknowledge the fact that you have gone through one of the most difficult things any human being can go through, which is loving someone that's suffering from addiction. And instead of judging yourself and going, God, why can't I get over this? This is ridiculous. I've already left. I can't let it go. You need to stop and say to yourself, change the language. Say to yourself, you know what? That's clearly an unresolved moment in my past that needs to be addressed. I'm going to forgive myself first for all of the feelings that are coming up, for the way I might have handled that situation, for staying in a relationship that was doing me so much harm. I'm going to be kind and gentle with this situation and see it through a new set of eyes, which is kindness to myself, love to myself. Literally imagine yourself in that moment that's coming up for you. Imagine that woman imagine you in that situation, and then send that woman love. Tell her in a loving, non-judgmental, compassionate, empathetic voice what she needed to hear. Because you have turned into and morphed into a hero. You are now a different woman. You are that woman's hero. You have transformed into your own biggest advocate. And so look back on the woman that you once were and send her love and tell her what she needs to hear. And then get back in the moment. Look around your surroundings and say, I am so proud of myself for the accomplishments and the growth and the perseverance and the things I have overcome in my life. Look at me. Look at what I've done. Look at how strong of a woman I am. Do you understand that? Does that make sense? The worst thing that you can do is judge yourself. And it is so hard. It's such a bad habit to break because you have been judged by your loved one your entire relationship. You have. They are judging you and they are reminding you of their disapproval of you constantly, right? And so you hear this addiction voice, that's what I call it, which is the voice of addiction, the nasty voice that's reminding you and trying to make you feel bad and reminding you how bad you are. In order to break that voice, you have to stop judging yourself. And you have to stop, that way you'll stop judging others. You have to stop judging yourself for staying and stop judging yourself for losing your mind and yelling or lying or trying to be manipulative or trying to be controlling. All of that needs to go. And the way that you let go of the judgment of yourself is you go back to those instances and you tell your old self what she needed to hear in that moment. Because you recognize that you have become and grown into your own hero. Okay, so hopefully that helps. All right, and the next wonderful woman in our community says, I'm still having a hard time with the fact that I wanted so much for things to work and would have done anything to make it work, but my spouse could not do the same. I'm getting there with accepting and letting go, but it's hard because I struggle with being upset with myself for being angry about those things for so long. Again, I love this. You guys, this is why I love our community, okay? we all have a lot of things in common besides the fact that we love someone struggling with addiction. We are all worker bees. We are go, 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 go girls. We are so hard on ourselves, and we have such high expectations of ourselves. And when we fall short of these crazy high, inappropriate expectations, we beat ourselves up. We actually are so hard on ourselves that we are delusional in thinking that we have some control or some accountability over their addiction. The last time I checked, you're not putting a gun to their head and making them drink a bottle, are you? I don't think so. I mean, why would you be here listening to this, trying to get them to stop drinking? And last time I checked, if I went through your phone history, you don't have any drug dealers in your phone, right? That you can speed dial. You're not ordering cocaine or any other kind of addictive drug. You don't have those connections, do you? And if you are, and you're having them ordered and delivered to you, you're not actually sitting down at the table with them and making them, cutting up the lines of cocaine and pushing their head down into the table and making them snort them, are you? I mean, I don't think you are. That would be very weird, right? So why on God's green earth do we think that we are actually responsible or accountable for their decisions to continue to drink and use drugs? Like, we have no responsibility in this. They are in charge of their own body. They are in charge of their own choices. You have nothing to do with their recovery, whether you want to believe that or not. That's their victories are their victories to own. They get to own them 100%. If you have a loved one that got sober, it's because they wanted to get sober. It wasn't to please you, because that doesn't last very long. That might last like a week of sobriety, but then they give in because they're tired of trying to please you. You can't take any credit for their victories, and you cannot take any credit for their failures. Like, the only things that you can sit there and own is your reactions and your decisions to their addiction. That's it. So when you sit there and you start to judge yourself again, you have to put this in perspective and go, am I owning things that don't belong to me? Am I owning emotions that I'm not ultimately responsible for? And again, this is why addiction is such a gift, because you can ask this question to yourself with all of the relationships in your life, because chances are this is a pattern, and this is something that you've needed to work on with many relationships, not just with your loved one. So if your child is coming home upset or angry, are you taking that emotion on as something that you need to solve? If so, I would ask you to reevaluate that. What if you just sat there and observed and offered some loving, thoughtful care, but it wasn't your issue to solve? If your loved one got a DUI and got arrested and put in jail, are you sitting there saying, oh my gosh, this is somehow my fault? Are you owning that? Are you letting the anxiety and anger and frustration into your body? Are you taking that on? Or are you sitting there observing your loved one and saying, I'm going to detach from this. I'm going to watch them from a distance and say, that's a really poor choice they made. I'm glad I didn't make that choice. And I certainly don't understand how they could have arrived at that choice, but that's a mess that they need to clean up on their own. I'm not going to try and come in here and save the day. I'm going to let them pay the natural consequences of their decisions while I sit back and observe and detach and think, how much more of this am I willing to put up with? How much more of this shenanigans am I willing to sit here and go, yeah, if this continues, I'm happy with my future, right? Let's take a look at that, because when we detach and we stop owning stuff that doesn't belong to us, it becomes way easier to, I don't want to use the word control our emotions, but choose our emotions. It becomes a lot less, life becomes a lot less like a roller coaster ride based on how everyone is feeling around us. And it becomes a very internal, peaceful journey where we are not reacting to everybody else's issues. We are living and honoring our own internal emotions. Okay, next, let's see. Oh, this is one that's important. Okay, so one of the women in our group said she is worried about letting go of worrying about kids when they're with their dad. Okay, remember how I started this podcast and I said there are some things that you need to get control over? This is one of them, guys. Listen to me. If you have kids that are 18 years or under, they are legally your dependents, meaning they depend on you. They depend on you for safety. They depend on you for food, for shelter, all of it. And your job as a parent is to become your child's biggest advocate and to protect your children. Period. Full stop. If you decided to give birth to a child, you decided that you will ultimately be responsible for their safety while they are legally dependent on you. What does that mean? What does that practically look like? How do I possibly do that while loving someone struggling with addiction? I get it. All those questions are probably going on in your mind, especially if there's visitation because of divorce. Number one. Okay, wait, before I get to number one, I just want to make sure that what I just said really registers. When it comes to your kids, you have to remain in control. There's no letting go of control, because when you let go of control, their safety is at risk. And it's your responsibility to protect them. So, number one, I want you to document every situation where their safety could be at risk. If you are not keeping a record of text messages or I want to say videotapes, but videotapes don't exist anymore. Video recordings on your phone of certain things, drugs in drawers, empty bottles in closets. If they're running late to pick up and you smell alcohol in their breath, whatever it is, anything at all that is alarming to you, that sends that little emotional trigger off in your body that's there, that's warning you, I want you to document it. Please keep record. Now, I've mentioned this before. There's an app called, Evernote. It's amazing. It's got a little elephant for an icon. Download it. It's free, and you can password protect it. If you're worried about them stifling through your drawers or finding things on your computer. And it's good it goes on the cloud or something, so it's available on all electronic devices. Document, so that if and when the day comes where you need to get full custody to prove that your children are unsafe, you have backup for your claims, because your lawyer will ask you that. The judge will ask you for proof, and you need proof. And I know some of you think, oh, Michelle, I'm never going to be in a courtroom. I'm never going to get divorced. That's never going to happen to me. He'd never fight me on the kids. Yes, they will. Probably they will. I mean, there's a very good chance they will, because divorce makes people do crazy things. And I don't typically hear of women, particularly dealing with addiction, getting a very amicable, fair, cohesive, lovely divorce. Usually does not happen. So start building a case for your children's protection, okay? Number two, and I've said this over and over and over again, no matter how young your children are, you must, if they are doing visitation, you must absolutely get them a cell phone. You must get them a cell phone. Dial their numbers or program the numbers into the phone and teach your children to call those people if they are in danger. So if their parent is driving a car and the car is a little wobbly, or they've seen their parent drink a couple beers, you need to train your children how to react to that. You refuse to get in the car, you take your cell phone and you call. There were many times where my kids had to go down to visit their father, and I trained my kids to lock themselves in a bathroom with the cell phone and call me when they needed me. And they had to do that many times because the police were involved. So, communicate with your kids. I know you're worried about, he's going to get so mad. Here's the deal. If he got his addiction under control and he got sober once and for all, you wouldn't have to go through this. You wouldn't have to go through these steps with your kids. So don't accept, again, responsibility where it does not belong. You are being a responsible parent by educating your kids. So number 1, document. Number 2, give your kids cell phones, train them on how to use it, train them on situations that they need to use it on. And number 3, financial accountability is so important. Know where your money is going and have an account that you can use. So if and when you need legal interference because your children's safety is at risk, you have the money to pay a lawyer. You can't sit there and say, I can't afford to get them help. Plus, there's a lot of lawyers that do a lot of pro bono work, so you can always do that. But please start putting money aside for legal fees. And also, it's just really good practice to know where your money's going, because I think a lot of people would be surprised just how expensive addiction is. I think it would be a big eye-opener. So getting control over your children's visitation is absolutely a good thing. Also, getting control over your finances is another huge deal. And we talk about that in the Stay or Go program. We have a whole module just on how to walk you through your finances. It's Finances 101, because I was very ignorant and had no idea about how to manage finances. And Brittany, our CEO, who is amazing with money and listens to financial podcasts for fun, which I cannot relate to, but love her for it and respect her for it. She teaches that module. So if you're interested in getting more information about how to manage your finances, particularly with addiction, that is a great program for you. And also, if you're thinking about leaving or you're worried about how you're going to stay, that is also a great program. Okay, so I think you guys, we're at 32 minutes right now. I try to keep these short and sweet because I know how busy you are. I could go on and on with more examples, but I'm going to leave it at this for today because I've given you enough to chew on. I love every one of you, and I know how you're feeling. I know the state of panic or low-grade depression or high-grade depression and anxiety, and I know that sometimes it can feel very dark and depressing and you don't have much hope. And that is the entire reason why I am doing what I'm doing, because I want to lovingly remind you that there is so much hope to be had, that you are going to turn all of this around, and all of this pain and all of this suffering is going to work for your good. It's going to pivot you into having the life that you want. And you're going to do this by asking and answering some very difficult, hard questions that you've been ignoring most of your life. Like what we talked about in this episode. What do I want? What do I really desire my future to look and feel like? And another hard question we talked about in this episode. How much are you willing to put up with this? How much longer? When my therapist asked me that, it was a game changer. My ex-husband was trying to convince me that I should be A-okay with smoking pot, and it felt wrong to me. I understand that's a controversial statement, but for me, it did not feel good. I did not like it, and I did not want it around my children. And she said, okay, so you've made that decision. How much longer are you going to put up with it? No one had asked me that question before. And I had never really thought about it because for me, living with addiction was just a one day at a time type of situation. I didn't think about my future when my kids were, 5 years from now. And so that question just kept gnawing at me over and over again. How much longer am I willing to put up with this? Am I going to be okay if we're still here in 5 years and nothing's changed? Are you going to be okay with that? Some of you will say yes. Some of you will go, look, I'm in it to win it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm committed to this marriage or relationship. Sorry, I just got cut off there. My alarm just went off to go pick up my kids. So listen, this is me lovingly getting a little in your face. I'm feeling a little feisty this week to lovingly ask you questions. And it is so easy to ignore me. It's so easy to go, yeah, I'll think about that later, Michelle. Like, I what else do you got for me? I get that because I do that. Like, I absolutely do that when I'm asked hard questions. But I promise you that if you really want to see change, resist. What am I trying to say? Do not be afraid. The reason why you might be skipping over these questions is because you're afraid of the answers. And that's exactly what addiction is banking on you doing. It's trying to convince you that these questions are not really worth answering. Because if you answer them, if you take the time to dig and dig and dig to the root of the answers, I promise you change will start to happen. And all of a sudden, your perspective on your life will change for the better. So please, write them down if you have to. Listen to this podcast 4 times this week if you must. Answer these questions before the next podcast comes out. Because I promise you that you absolutely should and can have hope again. It's right around the corner. And I believe in you 100%. I'll talk to you next week. This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with my personal thoughts and beliefs. We are bonded together by the fact that we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.